Well, welcome to all of our Urban and Inner-City Mission webinar participants. It's great to have you with us today. We have a very important topic that's near to my heart regarding our urban mission that happens through our schools. We're very blessed to have with us our subject matter expert, Dr. Rebecca Schmidt, and she serves us here in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod as the director for our school ministry. And not only that, she has lots and lots of practical experience, not only her doctorate in educational leadership, but also serving in the roles of principals and teacher and all of the things that go into truly understanding the ministry of schools. So we're really excited to have you with us today, Dr. Schmidt.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shave, for inviting me to be a part of this important webinar series, and especially on the topic of outreach through Lutheran schools. It's my pleasure to be here. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for such belongs to the kingdom of heaven," from Matthew 19, verse 14. And when I think about this topic, which I think about often, serving in schools, one of my favorite things to do as a teacher, as an educator, as a principal, an administrator in the many schools I served, was greeting families as they were coming into the school building every morning. And I think at that time of day, there is such joy and excitement. Their parents are checking in with what they might need for lunches and getting their students settled into classrooms. And on this particular morning, this little girl is Ella, who is 2, was pushing on the front of my legs. And I said, "Ella, how can I help you today?" And she said, "You are in the way. I need to talk to Jesus." And here she is, standing in front of a life-size statue of Jesus who has his arms outstretched. And I promptly stepped out of her way. She began to tell him about all the things that had happened on the way to school, what they had for breakfast, the homework that Hunter forgot to bring in, and all the many things that were unfolding in her day. And then she proceeded to put her hand on his foot, and she said to me, turned her head and said, Jesus has his owie." And then she put her fingers inside those the nail holes on top of Jesus's foot. And in her heart, this conversation that happened every time she came to school was really setting the table for a lifelong experience. She was 2. She wasn't a member in any of our classes yet. She would start preschool the following year. But coming with her brother and her family every day had begun and set that culture of growing up in a Christian environment. So very, very important. Scripture is clear. Children are uniquely special to God. From Psalm 127:3, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. And train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it," from Proverbs 22. When children matter this much to God, they should matter this much to us too. Ministry to all children is a top priority. Schools are critically important for children and families. Let's take a look at where we have schools and who we are serving. The map in front of you represents the locations of Lutheran schools across the nation. Each dot represents a school, and we have 1,950 dots on this map. When we look at our total number of schools and the children we serve, 67% of our 1,950 schools offer programs for early childhood children. and this ranges in age from infant and toddler to age 5. 30% of our schools offer elementary programs and middle school programs serving children kindergarten through 8 or combinations of those. And 4% of our schools offer grades 9 through 12 and for high schools and in secondary schools. When we look at the students we serve, over 200,000 students in our 1,950 schools. 48% of those students are early childhood, again, infant through age 5. 43% of those students are elementary through middle school, and 9% are grades 9 through 12. When we look at that student body one step further, 38% of our over 200,000 students are from Lutheran congregations. 62% are either non-Lutheran or unchurched. Clearly, our schools are serving in a mission field. Let's take a closer look at serving the underserved. Dr. Kim Marxhausen, based on her resources with the Social Work Degree Center in 2012, reports that 1 in 5 children live below the poverty line in the United States. That a minimum wage salary in the US is $15,080. For a family of 3, $20,090 based on statistics from 2015. We've observed a decrease of poverty in the West and an increase of poverty in the South. Let's look at this data a little more closely. In terms of numbers, poverty realities in America are reflected by far too many people, mostly children, suffer from poverty conditions. More than 15% of the population, 43.2 million Americans live in poverty, based on the US Census Bureau in 2010. Research shows it's very difficult for people born into poverty to achieve an education and earn a living wage. And I think in my experience with schools, poverty isn't just relegated to urban and inner city areas. In our schools across the nation, we have children attending all of our schools that may be experiencing the devastation of poverty. In terms of housing, 1 in 4 working households in America, or 10.6 million families, spend more than half their pre-tax income on housing. This is a level that experts say is unhealthy, if not impossible, to sustain. There is no community in America where minimum wage earners can reasonably afford to pay rent. In February 2012, the National Low Income Housing Coalition conducted a study that examined the cost of housing across the United States and found that no city had rentals priced low enough where a minimum wage earner could live comfortably. In 86% of the counties surveyed, even those who earned twice the minimum wage still did not earn enough money to pay rent and other basic needs. This is a significant piece of data to remember when we're serving with families who are struggling with basic needs. When we think about government assistance, it falls short of covering basic needs. Many people cling to it because they see no options for earning money for survival with their limited skills, education, and literacy levels. Nationally, the average welfare check for one person, one parent, and two children was $478 per month. 20 years ago, it was $408. The national average added for a baby born to a family already on welfare is $60. This is about 3 trips to McDonald's, and we can see that this is not meeting the needs or helpful for families. The average disability check is $600, and less than 2% of the federal budget is allocated for government assistance. In terms of food and caring for the basic needs of families, the rates of hunger continue to be extremely high for an industrialized nation. Many people think hunger does not exist because of certainly the press on obesity, but the true fact is 46 million people suffer food insecurity, and 1/3 of this group experienced chronic hunger. A person on food stamps receives $3 per day, and healthy food is expensive. When we think about work ethic, many people work hard and are still not able to provide for their families. This is a dominant belief in our society that if one works hard enough, they will do well. But according to recent census, 2/3 of people living in poverty are working 1.7 jobs. In terms of education, youth living in poverty are the least likely to become educated in our nation. Some schools struggle to address the needs of people in poverty and help them to succeed. Academic achievement numbers are low for children of families who struggle to meet their basic needs. People living in poverty often experience education as stress and see it as a place they do not belong or want to be. A college education appears to be the only possibility to help people break the walls of poverty and escape its hardships, yet today, it is less likely a person in poverty will attain a college education than it was in the 1940s. The effects of poverty are real. People in poverty often have internalized their poverty as a personal deficiency. They see no hope for anything but an insufficient welfare or disability check, or underground or illegal activities that barely pay enough to keep food on the table and often result in incarceration. Nearly 80% of people in prison cannot read at an 8th grade level. Poverty affects educational success, health, relationships, and most of all, it affects the ability for humans to develop to their full potential. Children living in poverty. Families living in poverty experience that no one cares. If they're in a school, everyone else seems smarter. Successful people are better than me. We don't belong anywhere. That poor people do not get educated. We don't have what we need to break out of the cycle. And sadly, they feel that there is no one to help. For many generations, the ignorance on poverty has promoted stereotypes and leaves people with little or no real understanding of poverty or its impacts on people. Programs, policies, procedures for helping people in poverty are created by those who do not fully understand what people need in order to move forward. And as a result, the programs and policies and procedures often punish or fail. And this is not just in our communities, it happens in our schools. And often we have children that are not recognized as living in poverty. We hold them up to the standards in a class of anywhere from 15 to 20 to 25 students, and expecting the same types of outcomes, and not recognizing that the burdens these children carry to school are there. And so understanding how to reach, how to care, how to encourage is absolutely important in this regard. And so we need to be knowledgeable about the ways that we can help and successful strategies for serving those who are underserved. What we can do. When we care for children and families, we want to remember that failure is not an option. If we cannot connect people or resolve a poverty issue, whether it's housing, whether it's special needs in the classroom, whether it's English as a second language, whether it's helping with basic needs, whether it's job retraining, whatever it is, we want to go to a network or a community that might be able to help. And if we're not personally able to help in the programs we're serving in, we want to find out who can. And so we want to keep failure is not an option. We must press forward. We want to build stronger partnerships. Poverty is complex, and it requires a comprehensive community-wide approach. We want to connect with other businesses and organizations and social agencies, and particularly in our schools, we want to connect to our school districts who have specialized services that will reach children and families and in our care for them. We want to rely on a full resource backpack and inventory in each of our communities who may be able to assist people in moving out of poverty. We want to learn proven strategies. In spite of the lack of education in our country about poverty, where there are theories that provide strategies for breaking through and working with children and families. And then probably one of the most important aspects is we want to be a mentor and to mentor the families and students we are serving. Let's take a look at those at a few strategies that will be able to help break poverty barriers for helping people move out of poverty. One of the proven methods is a strengths perspective approach. And this is marked by recognizing that every individual has strengths, that we empower students and families by focusing on what is good and positive about them, what they are able to do. We want to focus on what they know and build on this. And we want to focus on the skills that they have now. And really, if I were to summarize what are the best strategies for working, I think about the real estate adage, when you want to consider buying property, what are the three most important things you look for? It's location, location, location. And when we work with children and families, it's relationships, relationships, relationships. We want to affirm what they believe is good about them. We want to be encouragers. We want to stand in awe of people fighting poverty. We want to ask students and families for their help, find ways that they can contribute and feel that they belong, especially in the school setting. Feeling helpful, they want to be included, and we want to see that they can envision themselves as a productive member in that school setting. We want to give students and families opportunities to shine, and we want to tell them that we're happy to see them, that they may, and make them feel wanted and valued. And really, most importantly, we want to exude empathy, not sympathy, not feeling sorry. No one likes people to feel sorry for them, but we want to be caring, Christian, loving environment. Not always easy, because we know that in the circumstances of which they're brought up, they're not used to that feeling, and they're used to fighting for everything that they have. And so this perspective, looking at the strengths of the family, the strengths of the child, and building on that is very essential. With a resilience theory, people develop resiliency when they are surrounded by others who tell them what is positive about them. And I know from my experience with students who have come from underserved background, having that adult, that connected adult with a consistent relationship that is their cheerleader, who is that person that can serve as a mentor, who prays for them, who encourages them, who notices when they're not there, who rejoices in good grades or projects done or progress of any sort, often is that sustaining connection that will help children envision what it could be to live in a life not plagued by poverty. We want to help people feel special and show them what is unique about them, and to help them identify their own gifts. And we can do that when we educate ourselves about what those gifts are. And asset theory is based on the premise that a child is more likely to succeed with internal assets, which is marked by a sense of purpose, being able to interact with others, having conflict resolution skills, and anything that we can do to increase these assets is going to help that student be more successful. And also, looking at the external assets, these are the meaningful adult relationships, providing a caring school, a welcoming school, a positive climate, and hope for every child that is attending that school. The Search Institute, many of you may have been familiar with their work in studying developmental assets, have created a list of 40 developmental assets. This is very, very helpful, whether you're working in a school or a social agency or within your church or in your community. We are surrounded by people who are struggling, and we may not even know it. It's a great list, and at this website on your screen, you'll be able to access that list as well. Another theory that is helpful is a social capital theory. This is based on the premise that people increase their chances for success when they know the right people and have meaningful connections with those who can help. People in poverty greatly benefit from having trusting relationships with people who have benefited from education. Maybe in your school, this is an alumni or a family who has grown and has stories to share, and helping to connect people to people who have benefited from education is helpful. And again, that going back to that relationships. The more we can surround people and keep them from feeling isolated or allowing themselves to become isolated is a great and a very important strategy with social capital theory. We want to introduce people to others who can help them. Maybe it's community people or agencies or people within the school community who could be a mentor family to this family. We want to tell people about opportunities and programs and events that we know will put them in a place to build relationships with people who are educated. We want them to make connections face-to-face instead of sending them or sending a newsletter with resource agencies. It's very, very important to have that face-to-face conversation and encouragement. The least likely it's going to work if it's on your website or sent home in a generic newsletter. And we want to walk with them, offer to take them, follow up with a phone call. How did your meeting go? Is there anything else we can do? Or going with them to meet with these different groups. And again, that cements that family for that feeling to feel valued and cared for, and to walk with them when they have questions or feel uncertain about what's ahead. The fifth strategy is known as a faulty attribution theory. This is when motives are attributed to someone else's behavior without discovering the why behind their actions. One of my very favorite people in a school ministry used to say, well, what's the rest of the story? And an example I would have after many years of working with attendance and dress code and all the things that are involved in a school, when children were chronically tardy, often we might hear someone say, well, if they would just set their alarm, they know what time school starts, it's because they're lazy, but no one knows the burdens that are on the shoulders of a child or a family. Between not having needs met, worrying about finances, not having food on the table, the car wouldn't start, not having money for gas, all of these things are things that happen that we don't think about when we make a judgment that someone is lazy because they can't get to school on time. So really being sensitive to what burdens are families bringing to school, and taking time to find out more about the why behind their actions will help us to care for them better. And again, we want to build relationships that matter. To serve children, and again, this is the theme throughout. We need to serve the children, their families. We want to involve our congregation and our community. All must care about them. So let's take a look at where this is happening in some of our schools. I'm going to talk about some of our Lutheran schools that are deeply committed to serving the underserved, and all three of them have a very different look. All three are very, very successful, and you'll begin to see the common denomination of what is making these systems work very well. Also, these are great sources for getting more information about how to serve students who are from an impoverished background. And the first one I'm going to talk about are our Lumen schools. This is the Lutheran Urban Mission Incorporated. It's located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the purpose of Lumen is to provide safe Christian schools focused on educational success, leadership, development, and spiritual growth. And where this system and this organization has been successful. In Milwaukee, in the city of Milwaukee, we had 5 Lutheran schools: Granville, Northwest, Pilgrim, St. John's, and St. Martini, who were all schools that had been thriving at one time in urban Milwaukee. And over the course of years, the schools began to decline, and for a number of reasons in our inner city schools. And when our schools went to tuition models and families could not afford to attend and pay tuition, we know that this is a serious thing. If they're not able to provide for their families, they're not able to afford a tuition. And so the schools in Milwaukee were closing. And in the community of Milwaukee, all 5 of those schools were failing. Lumen, the Lumen Urban Mission Incorporated, consolidated, and through this process formed an organization to manage the 5 failing schools. And what they did was look at what families needed in the Milwaukee area and find a way to provide it. And so from a systems approach, 5 schools needed help with admission, they needed help with marketing, they needed a social worker to care for the many needs of the children they served, they needed resource support and specialists who can work with children who are not at grade level. They need curriculum development to provide a differentiated instruction for the children coming into their schools. They need to have the basic needs of children met with programs for breakfast and lunch. They have a backpack program that goes home with meals for over the weekend. And really, what they did was say, what do we need to serve these children and help them to be successful? So with this central model office, they hired a person in each of these areas who could serve the 5 schools. And then because Milwaukee is a voucher state, a choice state, they were able to secure the funding for parents could select a Lumen school to use their voucher. And again, thinking back to some of the things that we've discussed about helping parents with paperwork or with agencies, Lumen provides a person to work with all of the choice paperwork so the parent can get help completing it and migrate through receiving the checks and enrolling in the school. And what this does is it frees the principal and teachers, educators in each of those schools to focus on instructional supervision and working with parents. And then the system itself will manage all of the rest of the responsibilities of working in a school. And this has been a huge help, made a very successful organization for Lumen Schools. Now, with that, and once that 5 schools were settled and the system was working, they expanded their reach, and they have 2 schools in Racine that they have added to the group and are continuing to serve them with the same model. And then 2 years ago, they added a school in Gary, Indiana, which is Ascension Lutheran Christian, which is a huge blessing. So it's not limited just to the Milwaukee area. And the reason it works in Indiana is that Indiana is also a choice state, and uses vouchers. And so using the same model, using the same support, children now in Gary have that opportunity to attend these very, very successful schools. Not all of our successful urban schools are a part of a systems like Lumen, and each one of these schools Trinity First Lutheran School is independently owned and operated by its church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Their purpose is to equip learners and share hope. Our students and their families will experience this school as a growing family that learns together, supports one another, serves together, and shares the love of Jesus with one another. And as you can see from their mission statement, this is a community composed of children and their families, of their teachers, their principal, their church, and the community. And that strong, powerful relationship is what has really been a signature piece of Trinity First. They also, every school has to face the funding dilemma, and because the families in the schools I'm sharing cannot afford tuition at all. And so Minnesota is not a choice school, and Trinity First has been able to annually raise 94% of its operating budget outside of the school. And so with that great support and with that great community involvement, and this is why that network is so very critically important. They have area churches that support the school annually. They have donors. They have, and they continue by the work that they do and the successful work that they do. They are able to financially fund this the school that they have. One thing that really stands out about Trinity First and is the very dedicated staff. The principal is 100% committed to the school. The educators are 100% committed to their school and to each other. And that's one of the other aspects to consider in our urban schools, is that it takes a lot of training and professional development to serve, for a teacher to serve in an urban setting. And oftentimes the teacher education training that they receive is designed for a white suburban community, and being grounded and trained to work with urban families, exploring in depth what we've just barely covered in the first part of the webinar, is very, very critical. It is also very draining, and one of the best practices that Trinity First is using is that the faculty meets for devotions every morning. And this is a time to be in the Word before students are arriving. It is to pray for each other, to pray for children, to pray for families, and to really put on the armor of God before they go into the classrooms. And in a caring Christian environment, children will bring their experiences to school, and there is heartache, there is pain, and there is sadness, and there are days at the end of the day when faculty are drained, and will I have enough energy? Do I have enough resources? Am I able to reach these families? And so the second part of the best practice is that the principal has an open door and an open room, and usually some snacks or time for the teachers to just come in and debrief their day, to tell and share about what they're doing, and she feeds them in turn so they can be fed to go back to the classroom. And so understanding that to be a teacher and educator and serve in this environment day after day, it's very important to take advantage of professional development that specializes in urban education, and to keep this first and foremost. But what a blessing in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And then we have Unity Lutheran Christian School in East St. Louis, Illinois. And this school was opened in August of 2003. It provides the community of East St. Louis with opportunities to hear the saving gospel of Jesus Christ and teach the children of this community the wonders of God's love. And this school continues to grow. It has outgrown their facilities. They were able to move into a school that had been vacated by the city, and they continue to grow and thrive. They also have conquered they have a broad donor base that contribute to the school. They are led by a very talented principal. The leadership in each of the schools are stellar, and this is also a very important key. Each of the administrators in Lumen, in Trinity First, in Unity understand urban education, and they continue to shape their teachers and their staff, work very, very closely with parents. Several of the schools require parent education, and where parents must attend, and Trinity First is one that incentivizes it. If a parent comes, they pay them to come, and they can apply it to their registration fee. And they understand that how very important that connection is to reach the family. And these are all three very, very successful schools. And again, we see children in underserved families in our schools on scholarship, and it's very, very important that we are educated about how to best help, serve, and love them. And just imagine, consider children of today and tomorrow. Wonder at the many ways our gracious God will work in and through them. We cannot do this alone. We cannot do this without our Father in heaven. And we have to imagine what this looks like. And if we can see it, we can do it. Imagine children and adults sharing the baptismal journey as missionaries and world changers. We want to imagine children growing strong in their faith, focused on God's presence, nurtured in loving homes supported by strong congregations, developing healthy relationships, equipped as stewards of God's resources, and actively engaged in service, witness, and worship. Just imagine, to tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord. Thank you very much. This kind of wraps up our the webinar for today. Also is provided a bibliography and and any questions?
All right, very good. So while we're waiting for folks, there's a Q&A box that you can fill in. We do have our first question already. I just want to reiterate our thanks, Dr. Schmidt, for being with us today. As you know, as a director for our urban ministries, I don't think there's any more vital outreach that we have when it comes to families. I think our inner city communities look to our Lutheran presence in terms of how do we care for our elderly, how do we care for the children in these communities. So absolutely, our schools are a key component to outreach, as you said, and what a mission field it is. We did have the first question that came in was just asking about the idea of hunger versus food insecurity, and what's the difference there, and is it a matter of degrees? I know just kind of from the urban ministry side, hunger is typically more of a chronic issue. It's poverty related to families that just cannot afford food for their children, whereas food insecurity is kind of more external. You know, in other places around the world, if the road's out, if the bridge is flooded, if there's unrest, you know, those are the things that all play into food insecurity. But I also think in a lot of our inner cities, you hear more and more of this food desert, which is in terms of external forces, there's just absolutely no access to healthy food. Did you have any concept or ideas on that to share?
You know, I think about and I see this in our early childhood programs when we serve children from as early as 7 till as late as 6 p.m. Some children come with breakfast, some do not, and really whether it's a temporary situation where the road's out or they're short that month because they had a car repair. If a child is hungry, if an adult is hungry, it's hard to focus. And when we're really, schools are a very busy place and they're very intense. So structured lessons and homework and getting things done and turned in on time. When a child is hungry, I would even say not slept well or fatigued. All the education in the world isn't going to help. And until we address those basic needs, those needs of security. So maybe it's a name by any other name, but the most important part is to notice is when that child is failing or struggling or acting out, what's happening in this family. And for our urban schools, many of them just assume they're going to need help. They don't wait to ask or prepare the special backpack. They have the program ready. Everybody gets the backpack and it goes home. So it's going to depend on your context. Certainly in some of our schools where the majority are not in poverty, we never want to forget those that are, and then we quietly take care of it.
Right. And I think just in terms of outreach, you have kind of a year-round outreach through feeding programs, especially in the lean summer months, because a lot of times, from what I understand, the children will get a decent meal once a day, and that's when he's in school. So then when school's out during the summer, you have another opportunity working through your school and your students to supply lunch throughout the lean summer months for families that struggle. So I know we had that here in St. Louis, where we had a big grant that came in, and we were able to give out about 18 tons of food to urban inner city schools, the children, through our Vacation Bible School program. And just to talk about that a little bit too, we also were approached by Concordia Publishing House that year, and they wanted to have that year's project be something that was not global per se, but something that we could all gather our offerings throughout the Vacation Bible School for something here in the U.S. that affects kids. And I was glad that they contacted me, and I said, well, we certainly think about our schools. I mean, again, if you're thinking about the best way to reach children in the inner city, we have such a strength in our Lutheran school system. And so I was very happy to see our big city mission. But the thing that struck me is when we went to go ahead and we've done playgrounds and we've helped with scholarships and that sort of thing through our urban mission department, but was contacting somebody to let them know. To me, it seemed like a very small token of appreciation based on their circumstances. But to have a principal who is so highly qualified, I know she could have gone just about anywhere else in the country to serve, but she just refused to give up on her community, her students. She just loved them so much that she would never even consider leaving, but she just broke down in tears. She was just so thankful that somebody recognized the hard work that they were doing, somebody appreciated the ministry that they were doing. And so, I mean, just some really heroic people that serve as principals and teachers in some very challenging circumstances. You know, they haven't gone through these cycles that you were talking about of poverty or domestic abuse or child abuse or whatever it is that they are dealing with on a daily basis. They haven't experienced it for themselves, but they put themselves in the middle of this to set forth a new path. So, I mean, I just can't speak highly enough about our Lutheran school system, all the people who are there just serving in such heroic ways, and all the different means by which they do outreach, as you said, to care for people in mind, body, and soul for these little lambs. So that wasn't really a question. It was more of a word of encouragement.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can't say enough. As I'm still waiting for more questions that might come in. But the other thing for me, so I was in a Christian mentoring / tutoring program, and we were going through some poverty training and learning about, you know, some things that I personally hadn't experienced for myself, and it was very eye-opening. But the thing that got me the most, and I've spoken about this in different venues, but the thing that got me the most was when I heard the statistic that was almost a direct correlation between passing their assessment test in 3rd grade. You could almost see the path. If they didn't pass that test, then they were going to either be in prison or they're going to be killed in some sort of a violent crime. And so for me, I personally took that as, please give me a 3rd grader to work with. And fortunately, they gave me a wonderful student, and he passed his standardized test. He's gone on to finish his degree, and he's getting married, and he's got like 2 jobs. I mean, you know, he wasn't another statistic. So again, for me, the importance of this is this isn't just transformational. I mean, this can be literally life-saving, what's happening in our Lutheran schools in the inner city. You literally are setting students on a different path. And beyond just the temporal, earthly stuff, it's great, you know, to get a job and to get married and to buy a house and to break that cycle of poverty and abuse. But more importantly, that they'll have an eternal place in heaven. And you don't have that opportunity in many of our schools throughout the United States of America, to know that you're not only changing their lives, saving their lives here on earth, but that you're giving them their eternal home. And what an opportunity. I mean, I can't say it enough. For as much as our congregations struggle in the inner city, it breaks my heart to see our inner city schools closing the way that they do, because it's just, again, one of the greatest assets we have. It's one of the greatest strengths we have in the Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod. So, I mean, I know from my perspective, we can't do enough to support those schools, to encourage the people that do this work, to equip them to go on some very challenging situations that they might not be familiar with, but that they can bring this life-changing gospel to the students. But any last-minute thoughts, Dr. Schmidt?
Well, I'm thinking of a student in one of the schools that I visited, and I had engaged him in a little conversation, and I asked him, well, are you looking forward to spring break? And his eyes set so wide, he said, oh no, I miss my school when I'm not here. And that's the powerful connections that schools have. I miss my school when I'm not here.
Amen. May that be so of all of our Lutheran schools in our cities. And again, we just want to thank you, especially Dr. Schmidt, for sharing with us today and helping us to understand how best to serve our students. And again, just to bring words of encouragement for all those practitioners, and to give people incentive to consider how can I be a part of such a great ministry to our inner cities across the country. So thank you, Dr. Schmidt, and thank you to everybody who participated with us today. Make sure you spread the word about the great message that we're bringing forth in our webinars, and continue to tell people the good news of Christ in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.